Today is day 1 of the mink dissection. Even though we are doing this from home, I still want you to have some dissection knowledge and to be able to see a dissection. So we're going to try to make the best of this. And seniors, this is actually your final thing that you're going to do in honors biochemistry this year. So you'll be working on this for the next 2 weeks. So before we get started, there's just a couple things that I want you to check out on the class page, just so that you know what the instructions are and what you'll be handing in at the end of all of this. The first thing that I want you to check out on the class page is the virtual dissection instructions. I'm just going to write this all down for you so in case you miss what I'm saying, it's in writing. So that's on the class page. The other thing that is on the class page that you will actually need for today's assignment is your journal. So there's going to be, I believe it's 5 days of instruction, and with each instruction day there's analysis questions basically that you need to fill out, and then there's a section where you're going to write your thoughts on what you learned in that particular day of the dissection. So the journal is going to be handed in, and it's all one big document, and it's worth 150 points, and that's all explained in the lab instructions. So those two things you definitely want to take a look at today, as well as this video, obviously, and just kind of stay on track with things so that you get to finish by the 22nd, especially seniors. And as always, please make sure that you ask questions. This is the first time that I'm doing a dissection online like this, so it may not be perfect. I may not have explained something in a way that makes sense to you, so please ask questions, and I can, help you along the way. So we're gonna kind of go through this whole thing together. Okay, let's take a look at learning about the mink. Today I'm just going to give you some background information, and when you look at this picture, you can see that the mink is actually a very cute mammal, and we can actually study the mink and understand human body systems because there's significant similarities between the mink being a mammal and us being a mammal, so we share a lot of the same features as far as our body systems. So the mink, and you can see in this picture, he sort of looks like maybe he just jumped out of, just came out of water. That's because he's semi-aquatic. He lives near water, he's a good swimmer, he eats things that live near water, so he's eating things like fish and birds, bird eggs, snakes, crayfish, all those things. And you can see that this mink looks like a weasel. And the thing about minks, and the reason that there's so many of them and we can get them to use in lab, is that they're farmed and used for their fur or their pelts to make fur coats. So when they're pelted, they're killed, obviously, and Carolina Scientific, where I get the minks, buys the mink, preserves them, and then sells them. And the rancher keeps the fur and sells the fur for money. In my opinion, when I think about it like that, it is kind of sad. But on the flip side, for science, it is a way that students like yourselves can take a look at the organs inside the mink and kind of compare them to the organs that are inside the body, because obviously we can't be dissecting humans in the classroom. So there's good and bad to doing dissection. And I always get that question, where do we get the mink from? So that's why I am giving you that little background information. Now, mink live in the United States and Canada, and they're carnivores. They eat meat. So like I said before, they're eating fish and birds and eggs. They live near water. They eat frogs and snakes. So anything that is meat, they're going to be eating. And you can see in the picture here, again, a very cute picture. I'll be showing you a picture in a minute that's not as cute. But if you look closely at the teeth in this picture, you can see that the teeth are actually formed and used in a way that they can rip apart the meat and things that they eat. So they have dentition or mouth structure, teeth structure that allow them to eat meat. Mink are also very similar to skunk in that they can secrete a foul-smelling liquid that is used to mark territory. It's also used as a defense mechanism, and it's also used in courtship behavior. So they can be similar to a skunk in that way. A couple things that I want to mention, if you look at the picture of the mink, there's a couple things that are labeled there. And when we get the mink in, the mink obviously are skinned. And so some of these things are hard to see because they're, when the mink is skinned, these things are removed during that skinning process. So one of those things is the pinnae, and those are the external ear structures. So it's the part that we see of the ear. That's actually missing on the mink that you would see in the classroom that we would dissect. The nares are just the nostrils. Those you would see. That doesn't get taken off during the skinning process. And vibrissae are the whiskers. So that's this area right here on the mink, which are sensory, used by the mink as a sensory organ. Those are actually removed too when the mink is skinned. So you won't see the whiskers and you won't see the external ear portion. You'll see the opening to the ear, but you won't see that external portion. And we'll get into those structures when we talk about external anatomy in the next video. So as cute as the mink is, this is actually what the mink would look like when you would get the mink in the lab to dissect. A lot of times the lab groups, I should say all the time, the lab groups name their minks. So if you want to name your mink, you can name it, and then you can use this name in your journal. If you don't want to name the mink, that's fine too. You can just call it a mink, it doesn't matter. But that is something that the lab groups normally do. And so if you want to continue on with that, even though we're doing this online, you certainly can. So I want you to notice a couple things on this picture, because during the skinning process there's some other things that are missing. I mentioned the ears and the whiskers, but there's also, if you kind of take a look here at the limbs or the legs of the mink, you can see that the paws are missing. They cut the paws off when they're pelted, so those are missing as well. So you don't get to see like the claws on the mink because they're missing when we get them. So that's just another thing that you'll notice. And you'll also notice it's not as cute as when it has all its fur. So it makes it a little bit easier to dissect because it doesn't seem like such a cute little thing. So we'll be looking at this structure again when we look at the external anatomy, because I'll be pointing some things out, and we'll also be looking at body directions again, so that will be reviewed in the next lesson as well. So that's all next video. So this is just a quick little background on the mink and what it looks like and the family that it's from, what it eats, that kind of stuff, where it lives. And so let's talk about your assignment. Now there's a couple things that I want to just kind of give you a heads up on. I've given you a guide to kind of stay on track with the assignments. So when I give you an assignment, it's not necessarily that I'm collecting that part of the journal. The journal is going to be a document that you submit when it is completely finished. But I've given you a guide to kind of keep you on track, and it's just that, a guide. You can work as fast or as slow as you want. I would definitely try not to get too far behind. But if you want to work ahead, you most certainly can work ahead. And I'm hoping that I can get, again, I'm making a lot of these videos, so it takes me some time to get those together. So I'm hoping that I'll have them all up in time for you to kind of work ahead. But I certainly wouldn't get behind, or you're going to be doing a whole lot of work at the end time when it's due. But it is set up so that you can finish on the 22nd, but I did make the final hand-in date the Sunday the 24th. So in addition to the assignment that's listed here, you want to make sure you also read through the lab instructions, and you also pull that journal off and answer the questions that are in the journal. So there is a reading found in the lab manual folder on the class page that will give you more in-depth background information than what I mentioned in the PowerPoint, and you should keep all of your work in your journal and keep up with that so you don't get too far behind. And again, this is a guide. The dates are a guide for you to stay on track, so just keep that in mind. And again, questions, please make sure you ask. I can't stress that enough. It's the first time that I am doing this online in this way, so there may be questions that you have. I may not have explained something the way that it makes sense to you, so please do not be afraid to ask. Just send me an email and I'll get back to you. I'm on my email all day during the school day. Okay, so hope you enjoyed that intro to the Mink. The next lesson will be on external anatomy, so we'll get into looking at what some things are on the outside of the Mink, and then we will start getting into the internal anatomy and doing respiratory system, digestive system, and the excretory system, and also a little bit about the heart, but not too much. So that's it for today. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you when we talk about external anatomy.